You already know this story. A ship found drifting in the middle of the ocean, a meal still warm on the table, tea still steaming in the cups, a cat asleep by the stove, and not one living soul aboard. Except almost none of that is true. The real Mary Celeste is stranger than the legend built on top of it, because when you take away the invented details, you are left with a handful of facts that still, after more than 150 years, refuse to add up. 10 people walked off a perfectly good ship into the open Atlantic. Nobody knows why. Nobody ever found them. She was not born as the Mary Celeste. She was launched in 1861 at Spencer's Island, Nova Scotia, and christened the Amazon. And from the very beginning, sailors said something was wrong with her. Her first captain died within days of taking command. On her maiden voyage, she struck a fishing weir and tore open her hull. In the years that followed, she collided with another ship in the English Channel. She ran aground in a storm off Cape Breton and was written off as a wreck. She should have ended there. Instead, she was salvaged, rebuilt, sold to American owners, and given a new name, the name that would outlive everyone who sailed her, Mary Celeste. Sailors are superstitious about renaming a ship. They will tell you it invites bad luck. In this case, they would say it invited something worse. In the autumn of 1872, the Mary Celeste took on a new master. Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs was 37 years old, the son of a sea captain, and by every account that survives, a careful and deeply religious man. He did not drink. He did not tolerate a disorderly ship. He was, in the language of the day, a temperance man, the last person you would expect to lose control of his own vessel. He was also a part owner. Whatever happened to the Mary Celeste, Briggs had money and reputation riding on her. He did not sail alone. With him were his wife, Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia Matilda. Their 7-year-old son, Arthur, was left behind in Massachusetts to stay in school. That detail matters. It is the only reason there is anyone left in that family line to tell the story. The crew numbered 7. They were not drifters or press-ganged men. They were experienced sailors, several of them German, personally vetted. Briggs wrote to his mother before departure that he had a good mate and steward, and that the ship was in fine condition. 11 people. 10 of them would vanish. On November 7th, 1872, the Mary Celeste left New York Harbor, bound for Genoa, Italy. In her hold sat 1,701 sealed barrels of denatured alcohol, industrial alcohol not drinkable, destined for fortifying Italian wine. It was a routine, unglamorous cargo. It was also, as we will see, possibly the single most important object in this entire story. The weather in the North Atlantic that month was rough. We know from the log that she took a battering. We know she made steady progress east. And we know that on November 25th, her log slate recorded a position just north of Santa Maria Island in the Azores. That is the last entry anyone ever made. What happened over the following hours is the entire mystery, because 9 days later, 600 miles further east, the Mary Celeste was still sailing, and there was nobody on board to sail her. December 4th, 1872. The Canadian brigantine Des Gratia was making the same crossing when her crew spotted a vessel, moving strangely on the horizon, yawing, drifting off her heading, sails set badly. Captain David Morehouse watched her for 2 hours and could not raise any response. And here is a detail that would later cause him a great deal of trouble. Morehouse knew this ship. He knew her captain personally. He and Briggs had dined together in New York only weeks before, days apart from setting out on the same route. He sent men across in a small boat. They boarded a ship in good working order. She was seaworthy. Her cargo was intact. She had 6 months of food and fresh water in her stores, and every single person who had been aboard her was gone. Now, let us separate what the boarding party actually reported from what the world decided to believe. There was no warm meal on the table. There was no steaming tea. There was no cat curled up by the stove. No half-smoked pipes still burning. Every one of those details was invented later. We will come back to who invented them and why. Here's what the men from the Dei Gratia genuinely found. The ship was wet but not sinking. There was around 3.5 feet of water in the hold. A significant amount, but not dangerous for a vessel that size, and the pumps were in working order. One of the 2 pumps had been disassembled. A sounding rod, the tool used to measure water in the hold, was found lying on the deck. The forward hatch cover was off and lying upside down beside the opening. The ship's single lifeboat, a yawl, was gone. Not smashed. Gone, apparently launched deliberately, from a rail that showed signs of a rope being cut. The ship's register and navigation instruments were missing. The chronometer, the sextant, but the captain's personal papers and the crew's belongings, their oilskins, their boots, their pipes, were still aboard. And of the 1,701 barrels of alcohol, 9 were found empty. No blood, no sign of struggle, no bodies, not then and not ever. The Mary Celeste was sailed into Gibraltar, where salvage law required a hearing to decide what the Dei Gratia crew were owed for bringing her in. That hearing was supposed to be a formality. It became an interrogation. The Attorney General of Gibraltar, a man named Frederick Solly Flood, took one look at the case and decided he was staring at a crime. He was convinced that the crew had broken into the cargo, murdered the Briggs family in a drunken mutiny, and fled. When that theory produced no evidence, he shifted to another, that Morehouse and Briggs had conspired together to defraud the insurers and split the salvage money. Solly Flood tore the ship apart looking for proof. Stains on the deck he was certain were blood were tested and found to be nothing of the kind. A marked sword found in the captain's cabin turned out to be rust and polish. He never proved a thing, but he did enough damage. When the court finally awarded salvage to the Dei Gratia crew, they received only about 1/6 of the combined value of ship and cargo, an unusually low award and a quiet way of saying that the court had not entirely cleared them of suspicion. The men who found the Mary Celeste spent the rest of their lives under a shadow they had done nothing to earn. So what happened? For a century and a half, people have tried to fit the facts together. Most explanations break on one detail or another. Piracy, the obvious answer, and the fastest to fall apart. Pirates take cargo. They take valuables. The Mary Celeste still had 1,700 barrels of alcohol in her hold and personal possessions in the cabins. Nothing of value was taken except the ship's papers and instruments, exactly what a captain would take with him if he left in an orderly hurry. Mutiny, Solly Flood's favorite, but the crew were experienced, well paid, and had no recorded grievance. The alcohol in the hold was denatured, industrial spirit. Drinking it would have made a man violently ill or blind long before it made him murderous. And a mutinous crew takes the ship. They do not abandon it in perfect condition and disappear along with the family. A waterspout or a rogue wave. This would explain the water in the hold and the mess, but it does not explain why the boat was launched calmly rather than smashed away, or why nothing on deck was destroyed. A seaquake, an undersea tremor, could have shaken the ship violently, disturbed the cargo, and terrified everyone aboard. It is possible. It is also unprovable. Insurance fraud. Briggs was a part owner, and part owners have motives, but he brought his wife and his 2-year-old daughter with him. No plausible fraud requires that. And then there is the theory most historians now consider the strongest: the alcohol. 9 barrels were empty when the ship was found. Those 9 were made of red oak, a more porous wood than the white oak used for the rest. Leaking alcohol vapor would have collected in the sealed hold. A change in temperature, a shift in pressure, a single spark, and there would have been a sudden, violent rush of fumes and flame, a pressure wave strong enough to blow the forward hatch, cover off and drop it upside down on the deck. A blast with no fire behind it, no scorching, no burns, just a terrible bang, and the smell of alcohol pouring out of the hold of a ship carrying 1,700 barrels of it. Picture Briggs standing on that deck. He has a wife and a small child below. He believes his ship is about to explode. So he does the only thing that makes sense. He puts everyone in the yawl, ties it to the Mary Celeste with a long rope, and waits at a safe distance for the danger to pass. And then the rope parts. A brigantine under sail, even badly set sail, will outrun a rowing boat within minutes. The ship they had just saved themselves from sailed away from them and kept sailing in good order for 600 miles. It is the only theory that explains the open hatch, the empty barrels, the missing boat, the cut rope, and the untouched cargo all at once. It cannot be proven, but it fits. So where did the warm tea and the half-eaten breakfast come from? In 1884, 12 years after the ship was found, a struggling 25-year-old doctor published an anonymous short story in Cornhill magazine. It was a lurid fictional account of a ship discovered abandoned, with food still warm on the table. The doctor's name was Arthur Conan Doyle, 3 years before he would invent Sherlock Holmes. The story was fiction and never pretended otherwise, but readers took it for truth. Newspapers reprinted the details as fact. Solly Flood himself furiously wrote to the magazine denouncing it. It made no difference. Doyle even got the ship's name wrong, calling her the Mary Celeste. And that error is still repeated in books and documentaries today. Almost everything the public knows about the Mary Celeste was written by a young man who had never seen her, for a magazine, for money. The ship herself did not find peace. After Gibraltar, no one wanted her. She passed through 17 owners in 13 years. She lost money on nearly every voyage. Sailors called her unlucky and refused to crew her. In 1885, her final captain, a man named Gilman Parker, loaded her with a cargo of worthless goods insured as valuable, and deliberately drove her onto a coral reef off the coast of Haiti. He set her on fire to finish the job. The fraud was discovered. Parker was tried and was ruined. He died within months. 2 of his co-conspirators were destroyed by the scandal, one of them by suicide. The Mary Celeste sank into the reef and stayed there, a ship that outlived her own crew, only to be murdered for money. Strip away the tea, and the warm bread, and the sleeping cat, and the mystery does not get smaller. It gets sharper. 10 people, including a 2-year-old child, chose to leave a sound ship in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Whatever they saw, or heard, or smelled that day frightened them enough that climbing into a small open boat felt like the safer decision. They were right about the danger, and wrong about the ship. It stayed afloat. They did not. No trace of the Briggs family, or the 7 men who sailed with them, has ever been found. If you want more cases that were never closed, the full list is on the channel. And if you have your own theory about what emptied that ship, I want to read it. Tell me below.